Begin by thanking you very much for inviting me as the special guest of honor to this 13th Delegates Congress, and to say how much I appreciate being with you. I believe that the youth of our country own not just the future, as is normally said, but also the present, because the present determines the future. And so I definitely agreed to be with you this afternoon, especially because I believe that activism in student leadership is very important in terms of shaping our national governance and the political discourse in our country. Years ago, when the student leadership, pronounced on certain things, it was taken very seriously by government because there was solidarity and there was a lot of unity on the front of the student leadership. That seems to have changed now because our constitution guarantees freedom of association. There are many splinter student groups that have been formed, that are in kind of competition with each other. I was a student leader myself, having been SRC Secretary of the University of Ghana. I don't know who can guess which years. I'm a very ancient person. I was SRC Secretary in the year academic year 1980-81. And so many of you had not been born yet. And so certainly when you extended your invitation, I accepted wholeheartedly. The student movements have contributed greatly to the progress of our country, including contributing to the drawing of the 1992 Constitution. They've taken an active part in the politics and democratic consolidation of this country. But I can remember particularly one incident or benefit that has come out of student activism, and that is the activism that was undertaken by the National Union of Ghana Students and the student movement in general, calling for specialized funding for our educational system. It resulted in a stakeholder consultation, which was held sometime when I was Minister of Communications. At the time, my former boss, who had been the Minister of Communications, had been transferred to the Ministry of Education, Onaapo Gabriel. And he presided over this consultative forum, which eventually led to the creation of what we currently call the GET Fund. And I must say, since the establishment of the GET Fund, it has been the single largest contributor to educational infrastructure in the history of Ghana. And it continues to be a major contributor to educational infrastructure. Your theme is quality health, education, and sustainable employment, reviewing the past and present in order to repair the future. I think that the theme is a very relevant one, especially to the stage that we have reached in terms of our health systems in Ghana. We need to look at the past, look at the present, and see how we can plan for the future. That is what we sought to do when we were in government. We did not conduct our activities in the health sector in a haphazard manner. It was working according to a plan and policy. One of the first policies was to make sure that health facilities were available everywhere within the country so that people could access health care. And so our intention was to make sure that every district had a healthcare facility that was proportional to the number of population that it had. And so for smaller districts, we made sure they had a health center. For slightly bigger districts, we made sure they had at least a polyclinic. And then for the much major and heavily populated districts, we made sure that we tried to put up a district hospital. Now, you should note that it's not only the government that provides health facilities. We also have non-governmental organizations that have health facilities, especially faith-based organizations. And so you have the Christian Health Association of Ghana, CHAG, and then you also have the Ahmadiyya Muslim Mission Hospitals and other faith-based hospitals. Now, our intention when we were in government was not to compete with other non-governmental organizations that already had hospitals. And so the intention was that if there was a district that had a hospital that had been put there by a faith-based organization that was working well and providing the needs of the people, there was no need to go and duplicate it by putting another district hospital there to compete with it. It is only if the population overwhelmed that hospital that then government or the public could put another hospital in its place. The other policy was to train sufficient health professionals in order that we could post them across the country so that we could improve the ratio of health workers to patients. We found that in many parts of the country, we had a very large patient to health worker population. One of the particular cases was the Upper West region, where at a point in time, we had only 9 doctors for the whole of the Upper West region. And if you looked at laboratory technicians, you looked at nurses and all others, the population ratio to health workers was very huge. And so it was necessary to train more health workers and post them to some of these areas so that we could improve the quality of healthcare there. And that is why in many of the institutions, we began to expand the numbers that we were training. And that's how come many health institutions were opened, especially to train different categories of health professionals. We also set up additional public universities and gave them the responsibility of training doctors and other health professionals. That's how come UHAS came into being through the vision of Professor John Evans Atta Mills, and has become one of the major training centers for allied health professionals. Also gave Tamale Teaching Hospital, the UDS, the opportunity to train health professionals. When they started with training of doctors, they had to take the doctors to tech to go and complete. And so they started the basic training, but the doctors had to end up in tech before they finished. It was only in my time as president that they started to graduate their own doctors from the Tamale Teaching Hospital for the first time. When it comes to the issue of healthcare, we don't play politics with it because we say health is wealth. A healthy nation is made up of healthy individuals. And so we all need to work together to make sure that we're putting in the kinds of systems that gives our people access to good quality health. And that has been the main thrust of what we try to do. The third prong was to re-equip our health facilities with enough diagnostic equipment so that it made diagnosis possible and easy. And so one of the things we did was we took a facility of more than $200 million, and it was with that facility that we re-equipped all the existing hospitals in Ghana with X-ray equipment, with MRIs, with CT scans, and laboratory equipment, and several other equipment that were necessary for them to be able to do their work. And so under these 3 prongs, several health training institutions were opened all over the country. Community health nurses, midwifery training, nursing institutions, and other such colleges. In respect of infrastructure, we started to build several hospitals across the country. We had under one of the projects to build a hospital in Twifo Praso. We're building a hospital in Medina. We're building a hospital in Salaga, one in Nsoko, another in Tepa, and another in Konongo. In addition, we started to build a second military hospital in Ashanti. The intention was to build 3 military hospitals as emergency centers. And so the second one was coming up in Ashanti, and the third one was planned for the northern part of the country. Aside from that, we also were building a regional hospital for Kumasi, because Kumasi has a teaching hospital, but does not have a regional hospital. Teaching hospitals are mostly meant for specialists. And so, for instance, Kolebu, you're supposed to come here when you have to see a specialist. Often you must go to the Kolebu Polyclinic first, if you come with malaria or something like that. But, I mean, if there's no regional hospital, then everybody just comes directly into the hospital to see the specialist. And that's why we built the Rich Hospital. So the Rich Hospital is the Greater Accra Regional Hospital now, and Kolebu is the specialist hospital. And so other hospitals were planned for WA. WA didn't have a regional hospital, and so we built a brand new regional hospital for WA. By the time I was leaving office, it was about 97% complete. Recently, I hear the president has commissioned it, and I hope that it comes into operation to improve the healthcare of the people in the Upper West region. Aside from that, we built a hospital in Dodowa that I'm very proud of. Since it was opened, I think for the last 4 years or so, it has won the award for zero maternal and child deaths. And the people who used to be in that area, Dodowa, Shai, Osudoku area, used to come to Accra for basic medical treatment or go to Akosombo. Today, because of this hospital, it has reduced the travel of people from that area coming into Accra looking for medical health, because they have a first-class hospital that has all the equipment there to be able to provide them the kind of quality health care that they need. There were others that were being put up in other communities, but were not completed before we left office. There was one in Kumau. I don't know who comes from Kumau. The hospital there was not completed, and it seems to be abandoned. Recently, I saw the Kumau Hini protesting about the non-completion of that hospital. There was one in Abetifi, there was one in Fomina, another in Garutimpani, another in Sekendi, and we were going to upgrade what they call the European Hospital in Takrady into a full-fledged regional hospital. And so all these projects were ongoing before we left office, and several of them have come to a standstill, and we'll urge government to go ahead and complete them so that they can serve the purpose for which they were cited in these various areas. We also expanded the Tamale Teaching Hospital in order that UDS could use it for the training of medical doctors and allied health professionals. And so Tamale Teaching Hospital has been expanded. We started the expansion of the Upper East Regional Hospital in Bolgatanga. The structures were completed before we left office. It was just left to it, putting in the equipment so that it could provide quality health care to the people of Upper East. But at the lower level, for several of the districts and other urban centers that deserved, improved health care, we decided to put small polyclinics. And so the northern region got 5 polyclinics. The Upper East region got 5 polyclinics. We built another 5 new polyclinics in the Brong-Ahafo region. We built 5 new polyclinics in the Western region. And we actually built 10 new polyclinics in the Central region, a total of 30 polyclinics, all to bring health care. All these were meant to bring health care closer to the doorsteps of the people. There were also hospitals for which we received funding but did not start work before we left. And I hope that this government will continue from where we left off. For Buipe, there was supposed to be a hospital there. And then another one, a polyclinic in Bamboy, in Bole, where my holy village, in Yendi, Somanya, and for those who come from Volta region, it's called Huerta. not Huerta, Huerta. And so all facilities were planned in all these places. We also built CHIPS compounds. And in the 8 years of Professor Mills's administration and mine, by the time we left office, we had built almost 1,600 CHIPS compounds across the country. But there are 3 other facilities I want to talk about. I'll talk about the first 2. What we realized was government alone could not, provide enough health facilities to cater for all the health needs. And so aside from encouraging the missions and faith-based organizations to open hospitals, we also called on parastatals, government parastatals that had the wherewithal to be able to build hospitals to also come in. And so that's how come we persuaded Ghana Ports and Harbors Authority, GAPOHA, to build what we now call the Maritime Hospital in Tema. And that is a modern hospital that is serving the port community and the people of Tema. Indeed, that hospital has a helipad. And so in event of evacuations from the sea, either rescue or something, if it's a case of emergency, if a helicopter is involved, it can come and land directly in front of the hospital and evacuate the patient into the accident and emergency center. There's one hospital, indeed there are 2, but I'll talk about this one first. That is completed and ready to go. I don't know the reason why it hasn't been opened yet. And that hospital belongs to the Bank of Ghana. We convinced the Bank of Ghana to also invest in building a hospital in order to increase the number of beds available in the Accra area. And that hospital is completed, but it has not been operationalized yet. I don't know for what reasons, but we will encourage the Bank of Ghana to operationalize that hospital. It can improve access to healthcare, both for the general public and especially persons in the financial sector. For instance, we have the SNIT hospital that is providing, service to the general public. We have the Cocoa Clinic in Kaneshie that is also providing health services. So it's possible for government institutions, to invest in these health facilities so that it will not only provide access to more quality care, but also provide employment for nurses and other health professionals who are leaving school. Last one is, of course, one that all of you will be familiar with, and is the University of Ghana Medical Center. This hospital is a center of excellence. And the reason that was behind building this hospital was both to provide quality health care to Ghanaians, so that Ghanaians who had to travel to South Africa and to India and other places to receive specialized care could find that same standard of care here in Ghana. But it was also supposed to serve not only Ghana, but the entire West African sub-region, so that people who wanted open heart operations, people who had to do neurosurgery and other such specialized, services from Burkina Faso, from Cote d'Ivoire and other places will come to the University of Ghana Medical Center and undertake these, so that it will bring in income into our country. The center was said to have been operational, but it's not fully operational. I hear that it's just the OPD that is working with a few doctors and a few nurses. But all these investments that we made were meant to add an additional 6,000 hospital beds to our stock. And that meant that if we're adding 6,000 new hospital beds, then it created more room for employment of health professionals. Because I believe that we must create more vacancies and more opportunities so that we can absorb our health professionals as they come out of training school. So it's my hope that the government will continue and complete these so that we can find work for our young brothers and sisters who are training in these specialized professions. We also like I said, installed equipment so that we could improve diagnosis all across the country. And so the Kolebu Hospital was one of the major beneficiaries of this project. Tamale Teaching Hospital, all the major hospitals benefited from this. There is room for the use of more technology in order that we can improve the quality of healthcare. We've all heard about telemedicine. We talk about it every day, but we have not used it sufficiently, to be able to improve healthcare in our health system. And so it's something that NASAC should take a look at and continue advocacy to improve the use of telemedicine. Because you have remote health facilities where you have a young nurse, newly recruited, posted to a CHIPS compound, and if there were a means by which she could be in touch with the doctors and others in the district hospital, then it makes it possible for her to give some better services in that remote facility than if she was completely out of touch. There are new technologies coming out. We try to introduce what we call the V-scans so that nurses in remote outposts could use them to monitor the baby and see whether it was going to be a difficult birth or not. I've seen recent technology that is fantastic. It's an application on the mobile phone, and you just plug in the, I don't know what you people call that thing you use. You put the gel and then you roll it over the belly, whatever it's called. But you don't need a scan machine now. It makes it cheaper. If you have your mobile phone and you have the app and you plug in the roller or whatever it is, and then you apply the gel, you can use your mobile phone and see how the baby is doing. We need to apply all these new technologies so that we can improve healthcare. There are a few things that I will talk about before I end this, and the first one is to do with the National Health Insurance Scheme. As you are aware, the National Health Insurance Scheme was launched during the presidency of President Kufuor, and it has expanded phenomenally under Professor Atta-Mills, and even today it has expanded some more. It started with less than 1 million people. By the time I became president, it had expanded to about 12 million subscribers. I don't know what the current figures are, but it has been such an important social intervention that it allows our people to be able to access health care. For those of you who are too young, there was something we used to call cash and carry. Cash and carry was a very evil system, and you couldn't get treatment before you had paid. You had to pay before you accessed treatment. And so a lot of people died because they could not raise the money to pay, for the health services that they were being given. And so the National Health Insurance came to resolve that problem. And so once you had a card and you had paid your premium, then you were given the care, and the health insurance authority refunded the amounts used to treat you to the facility. Unfortunately, over the years, because of the expansion in the subscriber numbers, it has made the sources of funding inadequate to be able to adequately cater for the number of people who are using the health insurance. And so we started to think about what ways we can expand the income coming into the health insurance so that it can continue to provide quality care to our people. In our time, we had recommended that we're going to take 10% of the annual budget funding amounts from the oil revenues. We have what we call ABFA. It's called the annual budget funding amount, which constitutes 70% of the total receipts Ghana makes from oil revenues. And we said that if we added 10% of that to the NHIS, it will improve the access to money so that we could give quality care. Unfortunately, this government has introduced something they call the Capping and Realignment Act. And what that does is, it says that all statutory funds and other funds should not exceed a certain percentage of the total budget. And so if they do the calculation in the budget and realize that the funds, the amount of money accruing to the funds exceeds that percentage, then the funds are capped and the extra money is taken from the funds and put back into the budget. And so because of capping and realignment, National Health Insurance Authority loses some of the money that is supposed to go into the health insurance fund. Aside from that, additional monies are taken out of the fund to pay trainee allowances, and then additional monies are taken out of the fund for what they call the essential drugs list or something like that. And so by the time all these monies have been taken out, the amount of money left to pay claims at the facility level becomes a major problem. I have said before that government should exempt the National Health Insurance Scheme from the capping and realignment so that we can have enough money in there to be able to cater for the subscribers to the health insurance. People would have wanted me to talk about trainee allowances, but I don't want to preempt the work of what we call the policy working group. We, in preparation for presenting our manifesto to Ghana, have a policy working group that is looking at health, looking at education, looking at economy, energy, infrastructure, agriculture, and all the other areas. And they will come up with what our main policy thrust is going to be in these different segments. And so when they come out, I'm sure there'll definitely be a pronouncement on the issue of trainee allowances and how to help fund students while they are in school. But we must balance it also out with how we're able to invest in order that they can find jobs when they come out of school. I said, for instance, that in 2017, in the budget for nursing training allowances, provision of 232 million Ghana cedis was made. Now, if you divide 232 million by 12 months, you get about 19.3 million Ghana cedis per month. A young trainee, a young nurse newly recruited who enters the health service has a salary of about 1,300 Ghana cedis or so as the entry grade. And so if you divide that by 19.33, then it means that every year you can employ 14,000 young nurses. And so we need to look and see how we balance out, make sure that we're able to continue to help these trainees fund their education, but at the same time also make sure that we save money in order to let them get employment when they come out. And that's why I said it's both the investments in health facilities to create the vacancies that can absorb them, but also innovative ways in which we can increase the revenue so that we can employ more of these nurses. There have been suggestions to deploy nurses abroad and others, but it still does not absolve the fact that we still have a need for employing nurses within our own country because there are many areas where they don't have access to nursing care. And if you have not completely certified your own home market, how do you send nurses that you have trained elsewhere? It's only when you have achieved saturation in your market, then you can begin to export them to other places. My final point will be to encourage you. You are very critical to our health, and there's no human being on this earth, or I would say in Ghana, who has not at one time or the other required your services. And I know they teach you in school that it is not just proficiency in the profession that you are specializing in, but it is also your handling of the patient that leads to complete health care. And so service with a smile is something that your lecturers will always tell you, that if just one smile to the patient makes them feel that they are cured already. And so don't take your frustrations from home to the laboratory or to the wards and take it out on your patients. Yeah? If you have any problem at home with your spouse or something, leave it at home when you go to work. And make sure that you have a smile, to help speed up, the recovery of the patients that you deal with. But I want to wish you well in your training, and to also wish that we will continue to do the things that we do in order to create better opportunities for you when you come out. And so on that note, it is my pleasure to declare the 13th Residential Annual Delegates Conference of NASAG duly launched. Thank you very much. God richly bless you.